Hi, and welcome to the Days Gone podcast. I'm Claire Weaver, a screenwriter, author, and Days Gone fan, and this podcast is a place to discuss the game in all its glory, share my opinions, both popular and unpopular, and listen to me fangirl over one of the best games ever made. There will be spoilers ahead, so continue at your own risk. Welcome to the Freak Show. Today, I am delighted to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the release of Days Gone with a very special interview. Joining me today, direct from Ben's studio, is none other than the lead open world designer, Eric Jensen. Hi, Eric. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Claire. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for being here. I do want to thank you genuinely from the bottom of my heart for being here and talking about the game that we all love so very much. There is so much fucking love for this game.
No, and we've felt it over the years. I mean, the fact that 3 years later, people are still talking about it, still posting their photos and playthroughs and asking us questions and stuff like that. It warms your heart to have created something that's resonated with people so much. So we're super thankful for all the support that we've gotten.
All right, so as the lead open world designer, what elements of Days Gone were you responsible for?
Oh man. A lot.
All of the above?
Yeah. I mean, this was our first open world game, so it was all new for the team, and we had to build an open world team specifically for this. So, myself and 5 or 6 other designers were in charge of all of the open world content. So, the all of the enemies that you find out in the open world, the wildlife, like the animals and stuff like that, all of the encampments, all four of the encampments that are in the game, and all of the life and stuff that went into them. Um, we had the ambush camps, the Nero checkpoints, the hordes, all of the dynamic events like the encounters and stuff that you see out in the world. Um, all the encampment jobs, all of that was kind of under our umbrella, including all the like collectibles and stuff that you could find throughout the world. So you know it was a lot, but we were super excited to build out that world and create something that people are going to feel connected to. And so it was an awesome opportunity for the studio, but also for the designers that got to work on the open world with me.
Well, you did a fantastic job, and with such a small team as well.
It was, yeah. I mean, like I said, there was 5 or 6 of us working on the open world side of things, and with that came the task of you know thinking smart with everything that we had to do, because there's hundreds of hours worth of open world to explore and to interact with, and content to complete and things to find. We had to design everything in a way that made it so that we didn't have just 5 people working on thousands of things. Um, and so that was a fun challenge to be able to create a whole bunch of unique feeling content, but not have to uh you know by hand create every single encounter.
Mm-hmm. What element of what you worked on are you the most proud of? Out of all of those things that you had a hand in, what's the one thing that you're like, yeah, I did that?
That's a good question. The experience of just existing in the world, and being able to look around and see a herd of deer being chased by freakers, or seeing crows circling around the infestation, just
Mm.
the life that is there, and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the player's ability to kind of just stand there and take it all in and see things happening around them without their interaction being necessary. That, I think, is what I'm most proud of. We were able to combine so many different elements of interactivity in the world that brought it to life, and the player can sit there and observe it, maybe not for
Yeah.
too long before
Yes.
getting attacked. But there are those moments where you just you get up over the ridge and you look out and you see things fighting off in the distance, or you see deer drinking at the lake or something like that. That is a magical moment when all of those pieces came together, and
Yeah.
we finally started to see the world come to life. that was really cool, and I'm definitely proud of that.
Yeah. I mean, that leads perfectly into my next question was I was gonna say that the world of Days Gone is this beautifully dynamic, living thing with the animals, the freaks, the marauders, raiders all wandering around and interacting with each other. How did you go about approaching the design of such a complex and fluid system?
Well, we knew from pretty early on that we wanted pretty much everything in the world to be able to interact with each other. um, we didn't want to kind of silo things off. So, you may have like your deer habitat over here and your cougar habitat over here. We didn't want to keep those things separate. We wanted things to be able to interact with each other and look good doing it. And so that with that came a lot of testing, a lot of kind of designing around, what does it look like when a bear interacts with humans? What does it look like when a newt interacts with a deer? All of these combinations, and it gets super complex. But we knew that if we were going to deliver on that feeling of a real living, breathing world that was interactive with not only the player but with itself, we knew that we had to have all of these different combinations accounted for. Um,
Mhm.
and it was a huge undertaking for design. It was a huge undertaking for our AI team, to get all these things interacting with each other. And then huge shout out to the animation team, because that's where that fidelity comes in. You know,
Mhm.
like if you see a human and a bear interacting with each other, and the human is just like, standing there shooting at it, but not reacting as what a human would react to if they kind of came across a bear. Um, that's that's what we took to the next level, and we made sure that everything was interacting in a way that made sense, and how you would interact in the world. And so, like, when you see a horde coming across a camp of humans, they react. They'll
Mhm.
fight it to begin with, and then they're like, oh crap, we're getting overwhelmed, and then they'll retreat, they'll back off, they'll hide behind stuff. We knew that that's what would happen, and so we wanted to make sure that all of those interactions felt natural, and especially for the player that is wanting to observe that life, it plays out how they would expect it. As soon as it doesn't play out how you would expect it, it breaks that level of immersion.
Mhm.
And we didn't
Yeah.
want to do that. As few times as you can take the player out of the experience, the better. And that was kind of our goal, is to, once you got immersed in it, we wanted you to stay immersed in it. And so every step of the way, we made sure that all of that stuff just worked how you would expect it to work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, you guys did a fantastic job. That is, I think, one of the best things about Days Gone. There are lots of things that are, like, high up on the list. This is my favorite game of all time. It's a lot of people's favorite games of all time. The way the world makes sense, and I always describe it as feeling real, even though, sure, we don't
Yeah.
have rager bears in the real world, and we don't have ambush camps and things like that, but it feels real. It feels like what you were just describing, how what would happen if a horde went into a camp? That would happen. You get to
Yeah.
see it. You get to see it play out. What would happen if somebody gets eaten by a rager bear? You get to see it play out. It's so cool what you guys did. It feels so realistic, and it feels vibrant and alive around you, and I think it's something that people don't necessarily realize on their first playthrough,
Hmm.
because you're playing a game, you have a guy with a gun and you run around, you shoot things, boom, that's what you do, that's
Right.
what the game tells you to do, and then you start to realize, wait, that this world is alive around you. You can manipulate it to get what you want out of the game. You can take a
Exactly.
horde into an ambush camp and get the horde to take out the ambush camps. You don't have to
Yeah.
shoot them. You can lead the horde there, or a wolf or a bear
Yeah.
or whatever. It's
And
just such a good
it's
job you
it's
guys
one of
did.
the it's kind of one of the riskiest things to try to pull off too, because it's that emergent gameplay. We give you the tools, we give you the scenarios and stuff like that. You can play them out however you want. You can combine things. You can use a horde, use traps, use whatever, use your bike to lure things. um we have to be able to predict at least most of those things that the player might try, so that we know that it's going to work the way that they expect it, that it's going to look good. um and so emergent gameplay, the hope is that you just give the player the tools and they figure things out. um but you have to, as a designer, you have to account for so many of those things to make sure that they do what the player would expect, you know.
Mm,
So
mhm.
when I bring a horde and I have a horde chasing me and I'm like, "Oh crap, I have to get back to the Lost Lake camp and I want to get in the gate." Well, the gate's not going to open because
Mhm.
they don't want to bring the horde in there. So
Right.
that they lock down the gate and the guards that are at the posts start shooting at the horde, you know. That
Mhm.
didn't happen until we realized this could happen. And then we had to account for it and we had to, set it up so that the camp, which is normally, a safe space, can fight back, you know.
Right.
And you'll see the same thing. Sometimes you'll roll up to the camp and there's marauders at the gate and
Mhm.
they're trying to break into the camp and you can sit there and observe it and the camp will eventually take care of them, or you can help out and then they'll open the gate for you. It's those things that, especially with our QA team, we found all of these scenarios that could potentially happen, all of these combinations of things, and that emergent feeling, but we have to account for most of it.
Right.
And then hope that all of the things, the combinations of things that the player comes up with, uh, play out as they would expect.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things to do is looking at the landscape around a horde cave or an ambush camp and look for interesting features that have been put there to help
Hmm.
defeat the enemy. For example, the Belknap Caves ambush camp is littered with bear traps, and it
Right.
has the horde hiding in the cave down below. And I'd always had trouble bringing the horde up into the camp. They lose interest after a little while
Hmm.
and wander back down. But I found a way to use a single bear trap to catch a marauder in a specific spot
Hmm.
that will draw the horde up, and it's the right combination of being in the right place and the other marauders being in the right spot, so when the horde comes up, it draws them through the camp, and they can take out the entire camp with one bear trap.
Yep.
How much fun was it for you to come up with things like that, and what are some of your favorites?
So that's one of my favorite ambush camps. Phil Wilson, one of our open world designers, that was he was in charge of all the ambush camps, and that was the one that I worked with him the most closely on, probably because every time that I would do a run through and see how things were feeling, I would always get caught in that bear trap. and so and so I was the one that would trigger the horde rather than getting one of the marauders to go in there
Mhm.
and get in the bear trap and trigger the horde. I was the one that always fell into that bear trap because I wasn't paying attention. And so
The same
that
bear trap every time or a different one every
oh no,
time?
it was the same bear trap every single time. And no
The one
matter
near the
how
hatch by any chance?
Yes, yes. And so no matter how familiar I was with the area, every single time I would end up falling into that bear trap. And so in the game, that bear trap is called Eric's bear trap
Oh, that's awesome.
be-
That is awesome.
behind the scenes because I would always fall into it. And so Phil renamed that bear trap Eric's bear trap, just to commemorate all of the times that I died there or or that I triggered the horde and sabotaged my playthrough. Um, but that kind of stuff is super awesome, and that kind of goes to what I was talking about that emergent gameplay.
Mhm,
You found, we didn't tell you to use the horde; it was just there, and you
mhm,
found a way to use that to your benefit, and that's not a super easy ambush camp because you've got snipers, you've got this kind of center island area that you have to
mm.
kind of work around, and then it's got the double layers to it. And it's hard to kind of sneak into that area and without getting noticed and stuff.
Especially on account of the bear trap that you always step in.
Exactly, yeah. Especially for me because I would just I would always jump into that and start screaming. So um but it's cool that we had so many tools for the player to play with, and then tools for the designer
Mhm,
to play with, to craft these scenarios and come up with a way that allows the player to engage however they want, but we kind of hint at them certain ways that they might be able to use the environment or use enemies around them or use the tools that were set up to stop them, and you can
mhm.
use them against the enemies. So all of the ambush camps were a blast, but that one was a lot of fun because of that horde that was down there.
Yeah.
And it always, the first time you drive in there and you're cruising around, you either end up alerting the ambush camp or end up alerting the horde, and you're like,
Or
okay, crap,
both.
I'm just, yeah, or both, and then you're just like, all right, I'm gonna bail,
Yeah,
and
bye.
maybe I'll come back later.
Yeah.
I'll see you on Wednesday, and we'll try this again. Um,
Mhm.
but it's fun, to kind of play those things out, and like, it's one piece of content, it's one event in the game, and you can play it out dozens of different ways,
Mhm.
depending on your play style and your bike level and what weapons you have, and whether it's night or day, whether it's raining, all of those things play into it, and it's really cool that the outcome can be so different.
Yeah. I want to talk for a minute about some of the detail in the game, less so about the gameplay, more about kind of the aesthetic and the
Yeah.
vibe of the world, and how the world feels so lived in, so
hmm
kind of weathered and worn. What went into getting that vibe?
it was it was cool because, because Oregon is our backyard, like, we see all of this stuff firsthand, and so in the winter we'll have avalanches that'll happen up on the pass and they'll take out a road, or you have a big storm or something and trees will collapse onto the road and power lines will go down, and like all of this stuff that you take it you take for granted how much effort goes into keeping everything in order. There's this,
Mhm.
you know maybe not as much order in the world as we want sometimes, but there is some order to things, and things are taken care of. I don't ever think about, oh, I hope there's nothing in the road when I when I drive downtown or go to work or something. But that's what happens very quickly if the world is not maintained. And so that was kind of the first layer of the environment is, well, what would happen if 2 years of the Oregon Department of Transportation not existing, and the trees that collapse on the ground, the bridges that, are crumbling, and the roads that get washed out. All that stuff happens on a regular basis here, but we have people to take care of it.
Mm.
And so over that first 2 years, let's just pretend like Department of Transportation doesn't exist, and what would happen to the environment, you know? And then it kind of layers on top of that. So, because the roads got washed out or destroyed or whatever, people had to abandon their cars and they had to go on foot because there was no way to actually traverse the environment. So you've got all these abandoned cars all over the place. And then, you know, buildings get abandoned because the freakers are taking them over and they're building nests in them, and nothing is safe, and so you've got all these places that are either burnt out or infested with freakers. And we really wanted to tell that story of, over these 2 years, this is all of the stuff that happened, and you don't necessarily get to see that in progress, but we wanted to make sure that, within any frame of the world, when you're standing there, if humans had been there before, this is what has happened since then, because of their, either their lack of presence or the presence of the freakers, and what they've done to the environment. And so, you see that pretty early on at the beginning of the game with the bridge being out at that opening chase
Mm.
sequence with Leon. The bridge is knocked out, and so you have to go off the road and, jumping over little bridges and stuff. And then you eventually make your way back on the road. But then you've got a pileup of cars. You've got a semi truck that's turned over. You've got all these things. And that's exactly what would happen if things just kind of stopped ticking, you know.
Mm.
The
Mhm.
world kind of stopped in that moment when the freakers ran rampant, and they kind of took over. And the human presence was just not there in the same way. And you can kind of feel that in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I especially love the tunnels. You're talking specifically about the roads being blocked, the
Yeah.
tunnels, the atmosphere in the tunnels, the sound design, the way the sound changes. There's like an ambient noise to the tunnels, the lighting, obviously, the
Yeah.
way there always seem to be more cars in the tunnel than when you're
Yep.
outside of the tunnel. And some of the little turns that you have to make are often quite awkward. I'm not very good at driving the bike. I always oversteer, so I'm always crashing into things anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the tunnels, I'm like, "Oh, man, I hate going through the tunnels," but I love it because I love
Yeah.
horror. I love this kind of thing. So it's that sort of love. I love to hate it, or I hate to love it. I'm not sure which one.
It's a love-hate relationship. Yeah.
Hmm.
The tunnels were really cool because, when you think about game design, like you go way back, it's not as much of an issue now, but things like that, like corridors or doorways or whatever, were always there and used to load into a new area, or to slow the player down because assets on the other side needed to load in, or you were going to be going from one map to another. So there was a little bit of that thinking in the beginning of, okay, well, we need these tunnels here to separate one region from the other, or we need some sort of a corridor. There's like a little bit of a valley going from Cascade down to Lost Lake that kind of serves the same purpose.
Hmm.
um, but at the same time, we wanted the feel of the gameplay in that tunnel to be different. It's more claustrophobic. You
Yeah.
have to slow down on the bike. You're going to get knocked off. You don't know what's around the corner. As you said, the lighting is different.
Yeah.
And so there's some element of surprise and fear.
Hmm.
You know,
The
m-
marauders that sometimes lay a trap
yep,
for you there.
exactly. Yeah. And that's just it. Like that's a good example of, that you have to go through this area, and if even just one time marauders show up and attack you, then that's going to be in the back of your head every single time you go through a tunnel. Or if you're going to the gas station to try to find gas and fill up your gas, and there's people there waiting for you to attack you and to try to steal your bike, or kill you and take your stuff. It doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't even happen often, but it needs to just happen once for you to then question every single time after that, is this safe for me to do?
Right.
And that was kind of one of the purposes of the tunnels, is like, we know that they're going to have to do this. We know that you're going to have to fill up your bike. We know that you're going to have to go through the tunnels to get to the other areas. So let's just make you uneasy about it all the
Mm,
time.
mhm. It's the same with the question mark little missions, the little, you
Hmm.
hear something across the map and you go and investigate. Every now and again, that'll be a trap.
Yep.
Just every so once in a while. So, of course, every time you're following the little map markers, following the little footsteps or whatever, I always have to pay attention to what am I following? Because sometimes it's
Exactly.
clothes or like a gas can or something. There was something I'm like, wait, this isn't a signifier of someone's in trouble, someone got killed, and I can go loot their body,
Right.
or someone needs rescuing. This is a trap. This is a trail that I'm following that is
Yeah.
going to have a little, what do you call it, like a snare at the
Yeah.
end, and I'm going to be upside down, hanging out a tree.
That was one of my favorite events that we put in the game. The snare trap that, you get knocked out, you have no idea where you wake up, you're in a cage, they took all your stuff.
Very disorienting and panic-inducing
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, and it's not, it kind of goes against a lot of traditional design principles to do that kind of thing to the player, because it you're immediately taking control away from them. We're throwing you into a situation where you don't know what's going on. We've taken away all of your stuff. It kind of breaks some rules and kind of goes against what you should be doing. Um, but it fits with the world, and it was something that we had to do in order to continue making the player feel like, don't get comfortable, you know. And like with those question marks, we wanted to just kind of pop them up on the map for just a second. So it was kind of like, that moment when you're like hiking or something and you hear a stick break, and you look around and you're like, what was that? And you have that choice in your head of, okay, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear it and I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to maybe walk a little bit faster because I don't know what that was. Or or I'm going to go look and see what that stick breaking was, because maybe it's an opportunity.
Mm,
In normal everyday life, you're going to think, oh crap, it's a bear or somebody's following me and I'm going to get out of there. But when you're in this desperate world where you're trying to survive, it could be an opportunity.
yeah.
I need gas, I need ammo, I need bandages, and if there's something over there, yes, there's a risk, because it could be a trap, or it's a deer that just stepped on something and I'm going to be able to go get meat for the camp or something. Um, but in that moment, we want the player to assess the situation and process what, is the risk worth the reward?
Mm.
And you never know. And there's something kind of exciting about that, of always having something around you that could potentially kill you or give you some benefit, for yourself, or to bring back to the camp.
I want to ask about the apparent prankster in Marion Forks. So there's a pipe bomb, or rather a cherry bomb, in the toilet of the hotel at Marion Forks, and there's an airbag, or perhaps a whoopee cushion, under a seat in the diner. Were you responsible for putting those there?
I was not directly responsible, but one of the things, as we got closer to completing the game, uh, one of the things that we wanted to do was kind of litter the world with storytelling moments. There's I think it's down in Crater Lake. I think it's in Crater Lake by one of the ambush camps. I think the southernmost. There's a scene that looks like people are playing beer pong.
Mhm.
There's scenes where there's like teddy bears, lined up along the side of the river or something like that. We wanted to have these little moments where people are going to be going crazy. People are going to be trying to entertain themselves and prevent themselves from going crazy. When you're desperate and you're trying to survive, you you kind of think irrationally, or kind of playfully in a sense. And so, I had a couple of the open world designers kind of just go around and walk the environment and look at opportunities for doing something silly, doing something out of place, um, something that is you're going to think, what was going on here, you know, and then you write the story yourself.
Mhm.
You see this thing and you're like, huh, I wonder what they were doing. And sometimes we thought it through, and we made up a story ourselves. Other times we just, threw a pipe bomb in a toilet and hope that somebody walks up to it and is like, what's the story here? What led to this event? And I guess I'll just take this pipe bomb because I need it.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little moments in the environment that are like that uh it goes back to what you were saying about the world feeling lived in. And it's not something that you would expect, but at the same time it makes you feel like, yeah, there were people here doing things since all of this went down. And this is the evidence of that.
It goes back to what you were saying about the world feeling real, and
Yeah.
it's not just you put in a bunch of broken roads and cars and blocked tunnels and things like that. It's like, no, there are real animals wandering around that really interact with each other. There are
Hmm.
real hordes and marauders interacting with each other, and there were real people who really did play beer pong or leave a pipe bomb in a toilet or whatever. Like, they had a
Exactly.
real reaction, like you say, to the world that they're in. They needed an element of humor, or they needed to blow off some steam. Not every
Yeah.
second of every day in this environment is going to be spent, sitting in a bush with a gun or something, feeling like you're gonna die. There might have been
Yeah.
times when they wanted to cut loose and play a bit of beer pong, and then probably got, rushed by a horde and died.
Probably, yeah, yeah. But in that moment, there was some semblance of normalcy,
Mhm.
and I think that that's what everybody in the world of Days Gone was trying to find. It was just a little fragment of, I feel okay in this moment. I feel normal, and we wanted you to be able to see that in the world. Those
Right.
moments where it was quiet for a minute. Let's just sit by the lake and hang out with our, stuffed animals that we found on the side of the road. And maybe that's all that they had to talk to.
Yeah. Is it true that all the car license plates in the game are initials of people who worked on it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to say that there's maybe like a dozen variations of it, but yeah, it was designers and artists and animators and stuff like that. It was their initials, and then it was some combination of their birthday for the numbers on
Oh.
the end.
Oh, cool.
So, uh,
That's awesome. Alright, so I wanna talk about one of the biggest elements of the game, obviously, the hordes.
mhm,
They feel a lot of the times like they have their own personalities. Like, the Iron Butte horde will follow you over great distances. You can pretty much
right.
lead them anywhere. Whereas others seem to lose interest pretty quickly, like the Lobot Drawridge Horde doesn't really, it's super lazy, doesn't really want to follow you
Right.
even to the other side of the little area that they're in. Can you talk about designing and developing the personalities of the hordes and why it's important to have that variety?
When we were planning on putting the hordes out there, we knew that we wanted to have like different sizes and kind of locations where they would feed or go down and drink water or hibernate, um, and kind of depending on the environment, that meant that some of them would be able to have to go over greater distances, or some of them would eat and drink kind of in the same spot, or um, just having a little bit of variety to it. And so there wasn't going to be one situation that suited all because the environment was just so different all over the place. And so we tried to we tried to have some level of progression to it. So like up in the upper regions, there's smaller hordes, and as you move further down the map, they get bigger and more menacing and stuff like that. But the balance of kind of their territory and the size creates very different scenarios. And we found that like we didn't change the behavior of the horde depending on the size or depending on the location. It was the same behavior, but when you have 20 freakers in a horde compared to 200, their behavior was different. Even though it was the same, it felt very different. And so it was kind of a happy accident of, as we changed the sizes of these things and we changed their range of interest in continuing to chase you, the experiences were very different. And especially if you layer in the environment changes,
Mm.
some it makes more sense to stay on your bike, some it makes more sense to stay on your feet and get the high ground and try to attack them that way. But every individual horde plays out and feels different than the previous one, and the behaviors are identical. It's just the way that, the number of freakers or the environment that they're in, or how far away they get from, their nesting area or their feeding area, creates these completely different scenarios. And it just kind of happened when we started playing with those variables. And like I said, it's one of those happy accidents. But we found that like really anywhere that we put the horde creates a really cool, unique uh, gameplay experience. And so that's just one of the awesome things about the horde is how versatile it was, and how um, varying the experience can be depending on where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned in your interview with Kevin McAllister on the Broken Road blog that you built a lot of dynamic systems that would adapt to the state of Deacon or how the player was
Mhm.
playing the game so that no two experiences would be exactly the same. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the the simplest form of that was just night and day. So we had the freakers behave differently during the night and day. You don't see them out during the day as often as you do at night. And so for everything, for human interaction, for animals, that was kind of the base level of this changes their behavior. You're going to see humans out during the day a lot more because the freakers aren't. Animals, depending on which animal it was, you would see some of them out during the day, some of them out at night, um, and their behaviors would be a little bit differently. Their senses would change. How aware they were of certain things would be different based on if it was night or day. Um, and then the weather is another layer to that.
Mm.
So during the day, if it was cloudy and raining, you might get some of that nighttime influence. So you might see more freakers out during the day if it's cloudy and overcast and raining. Um, and so a lot of that stuff played into, a lot of the tuning and stuff that we did. But then the players' health, the players' bike health and stuff like that, we would check into that all the time. So if the player was, low on health or low on ammo, you would potentially be more likely to come across those little question marks. And if you chased after them, you might find locations where you could find extra gas or a med kit or some ammunition. Um,
Oh, interesting.
but only if all of those variables kind of lined up, you know?
Mm,
And so we would keep track of that stuff, and so the player state, the motorcycle state, the world, all of those things influenced what kind of scenarios you could get yourself into.
that's fascinating. Speaking of scenarios, I read that you wanted to put in a freaker Sasquatch, which would have been absolutely awesome. Are you disappointed that Bigfoot didn't make it into the final game? Or wait, did Bigfoot make it into the final game?
Or yeah, or did it? Yeah, I don't know. It was something that our lead character artist Greg Callahan and I had joked about for years because he was a big Bigfoot fan, and Oregon has all sorts of like lore and old wives' tales and stuff about Sasquatch or Bigfoot being in this area, and there's been sightings and stuff like that. So we just thought it would be one of those fun little Easter eggs to kind of have something in the background.
Mhm.
But no, we ended up not doing it. It's again, it's one of those things that if you saw it, it would kind of take you out of the element that we were creating. Yeah, and there was a lot of stuff that we explored early on in the development that could have been cool. But tonally it would have taken you out of the experience. And so we took the ideas that we had for those things and implemented the fun aspects of it into other things. But there were things that we got rid of because just we didn't want to take you out of the experience and break the tone
Mm.
that we were trying to go for, because there's it's okay to have those kind of goofy moments every once in a while, like the pipe bomb in the toilet or the beer pong on the hill right next to an ambush camp. um but those make sense in the world. And there were certain things that we just we pulled back on, or we just ended up not pursuing at all, just to maintain that level of relatability with the world and the realism of the story that we were trying to tell.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Is there a story behind the Lopez family graffiti? That's one of my favorite things to find in the game. There's usually graffiti that says Lopez family was here. Is there a story behind that?
I don't think so. I don't There was a lot of stuff like that. There was like certain graves that had different names on them. There were little stories in some of the bunkers that you'd see, like little tick marks and stuff on the wall or something like that. Um, that was honestly, it was our artists feeling inspired to just kind of either it was a family name or something that they just made up. But it's those are the things that like give it a little bit more personality, and you're like, huh, I wonder what that was. And like I said, we didn't always have a backstory behind all of those things, but every time that you see something like that, you're thinking, huh, I wonder if this means something. I wonder if there's something more to this, and you can kind of create your own story out of it. um there is the scene later on in the game when you're at the university. There's a scene with Deacon and Sarah where they go into one of the classrooms and they see a whole bunch of people that had made peace with the situation and kind of decided that it wasn't worth living for. And there's a big whiteboard in there that has a whole bunch of names of all of the people that decided to call it quits. And that's the whole studio. That's all of us. We went into one of the offices and wrote our names on the whiteboard and took pictures of them and put them all on the whiteboard. And that's the whole team that put their names on that
That's
whiteboard in
so
there. So
cool.
some things have a bigger connection, but others we wanted to just kind of let players fill in the gaps themselves and
Mhm.
kind of create their own story out of it, because that's what Deacon would have done.
Right.
There's no you know there's no way for him to know who the Lopez family was or who was down in the bunker, marking off the days of time that were passing to try to keep track of what was going on. But
Mhm.
you know, in any situation like that, you're gonna start coming up with your own kind of stories to kind of fill in the world and make sense of it as best as you can.
Yeah. Were you involved in creating any of the challenges?
Yeah, so I I didn't I didn't make any of the challenges directly. I worked with the team on the challenge mode. I had a challenge that I was working on that ended up not making the cut, which it could have been pretty cool. But Um, the challenges were awesome. It was one of the times where we got to kind of break that uh, kind of tone,
Hmm.
and do something completely different. And that's why it was, kind of separate from the main game, because we didn't want it to pull from the tone of the story or anything like that. But it gave us, a little bit of a chance to have some fun with it, and to try things that we wouldn't have been able to try in the main game, and just kind of goof around with ideas. And we were able to have a lot of fun as a design team working on the challenges.
Yeah. What was the challenge idea you had that didn't make the cut?
So, there's the golf cart. Obviously, we did our uh, arcade taxi inspired challenge with the golf cart. But so I was actually involved early on in making the golf cart work. Behind the scenes, it's just Deacon's motorcycle, and I just added another set of wheels to it, and then we had it. One of the artists worked with me on reskinning it to be the golf cart, and so that when it's uncapped, you can drive the golf cart just as fast as the motorcycle, and it's got nitrous and all sorts of stuff, just like the bike does. So I had worked on that early on, and so I knew that if I was going to make a challenge, I wanted to do something with the golf cart. And so I had put together this super post-apocalyptic looking golf cart with it had solar panels on the top. It was electrified, and did all this cool stuff. And the idea was, um, you had to make it across the map before the sun went down, because otherwise you would end up losing power. And so there's a game called, I think the game's called Chase the Sun or Race the Sun or something like that. And you basically just you have the sun on the horizon, and as the sun's going down, you start losing energy. And so the idea was you'd get the golf cart from one end of the map to the other as fast as you could, chasing the sun. So the sun is
Mm.
setting on the other side of the map, and you'd have to get there as soon as possible. Once the sun went down, then you had only a certain amount of time that your battery would last, in order to get you all the way to the finish line. So it was fun, and it was cool to play around with it. But because it took like going across the entirety of the map, there were some issues that I ran into with um, the challenge itself, and so I ended up sunsetting it. No pun intended.
I was going to ask, how much of a role did the challenges play in creating the landscape of the game? Were the challenge levels built around what had already been designed, or was some of the world designed with challenge mode in mind?
So the challenges were layered on top of what was already there, which actually made them a little more challenging, because we had to take what was there, and we didn't want to affect the main game. Um, so we kind of just layered on top of the main map what these experiences could be. And it was really cool, thinking about it that way, knowing that we can't change anything. We can layer stuff on top of it, but we can't change anything because it's going to affect the main game, and we don't want to have to mess with stuff on that side of things, and
Hmm.
potentially break the tuning and the flow to things on that side. So it was a cool experience for the designers, because we got to explore the world, and think, okay, well, where would a cool place to have this, like, arcade experience be? And so we got to spec out stuff, and especially for like the bike race ones, we kind of just raced around the world and found really cool paths that would make, for a cool circuit or a race or something like that. And so it was fun working with, we worked with the environment team, and they helped us kind of layer in, obstacles and stuff that we could, put in place and stuff like that. But it was cool because we didn't change the world. And so if you do any of those challenges, you can go to those exact locations in the main game. And aside from like the flags or the
The
finish lines
ramps and
and stuff
things.
like that, yeah,
Hmm.
the ramps, everything else is identical to the main game.
Yeah, that's cool. Which is your favorite challenge, and do you have gold in all of them?
I do have gold in all of them. So I have the platinum, and then I have 100% on all of the expanded trophy stuff. Um, and yeah, getting gold, that was a challenge, but it was fun. I want to say my favorite is the taxi arcade inspired game. that one's really cool. I'm a big fan of Crazy Taxi, and so to be inspired, by that and to have been able to execute on something like that within another game was kind of cool. We basically recreated that game in our game, and then it was cool because one of the things that makes that game so special is the music, and we got to feature some of our own talent. So we have people within the studio that are musicians or are part of bands or whatever, and that's all the music that was featured in that challenge was people that are within the studio or have ties to the studio, and so we were able to showcase some of their music in that, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool. How many times have you personally played Days Gone, and what's your favorite character or thing about the game from a player's point of view?
Okay. um Man, it's hard to gauge how many times I've played it because it at least in production, like it was never like a start to finish playthrough. It was kind of all piecemeal here and there. Um, when we were done, right before launch, I got my pre-release code when all the like journalists and media and stuff was playing the game, and my goal was to get the platinum before midnight when the game launched, and I was able to do that, and so that was cool because I being able to say that I 100% of the game right before it came out, right before the public was able to play it, was that was really cool. But that was actually the first time that I had played it nonstop, start to finish. I'd seen all of the cinematics. There were some cinematics in the game that I purposefully did not watch because I didn't want to be spoiled as to the experience. And so when I got to play it for my platinum run, that was my first time playing the game all the way through as it was intended. Um, and it was cool. There was stuff that I had played before, but I didn't have the context of it as
Mhm.
it fit within the story and stuff, and so it was a completely different experience. So, um, since then I've probably played it. I want to say 4 or 5 times. Obviously, playing the additional difficulties that we added and then doing new game plus and stuff. I've probably played it 4 or 5 times since launch, but man, I've probably got thousands of hours into that game.
Mm. Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Favorite character. My favorite character is probably Wade Taylor,
Ah.
the guy that Deacon ran into when he first started joining the militia down south.
Mhm.
That
Deacon St. John, son of a preacher
son
man.
of a preacher man, yeah. Yeah, it's like, man, that's a hell of a name.
And it is.
It
That was
is.
one of the moments where I really started to enjoy the I really started to appreciate the work that had gone into the game because I play games, I'm a storyteller, I love worlds and stories and immersing myself in the game and pretending like it's not a game. Just
Right.
suspending my disbelief. And as some people like to play video games from more of a gamer point of view, where they're like gaming the game, understanding the mechanics, understanding the ways that they can win or beat the system,
Mhm.
use it to their advantage. I just kind of go with the flow. But I had been sort of thinking about the story and thinking about the one thing that kept taking me out was Deacon St. John being such a kind of a protagonist name. It's a little overkill. No, I love the game. I'm not dissing it, no shade.
No.
But it's a little bit of a protagonisty name. So when Wade comes in and is like, Deacon St. John, what a name. I'm like,
And he makes
yes.
fun of it a little bit. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. It was like, damn, the people who made this game, they know it's a little bit of a silly name and they're having fun with it. They're poking
Yeah.
fun at it. And that was just so fucking awesome. I loved that moment. I actually interviewed Jamie McCune, who played Wade.
Oh, he's such a cool guy.
He is,
He's
yeah.
he's so cool, and the character that he brought to Wade Taylor, you know, spoilers, but Wade doesn't make it.
Mhm.
And man, that was so. This to answer both of your questions. Wade Taylor is one of my favorite kind of tertiary characters, and that moment where he dies
Mm.
is probably one of the like top two of like the most heartbreaking emotional moments in the game. The other one being when Deacon, uh, puts down that girl that had been tied up and tortured by the Rippers.
Mm,
They were just
mhm.
they were just really powerful moments, and it just makes you think like man, what would I do in that situation? I don't know. I have no idea. I would
Yeah.
hope that I would do the right thing. But that moment with the death of Wade and that overdose, it it was rough. But that was, man, the performance that James gave for that was brilliant, and even through all of his tortured existence in the game, he was humorous.
Hmm.
He brought some charm to it and some character, and
Innocence almost. So a little bit of
yeah,
what
yeah,
we've lost, what all these characters have lost. The world has lost its innocence, and then here's Wade. Yeah, he's
yeah,
slightly
yeah,
childlike.
yeah. There was a special character, and yeah, I absolutely love that.
It's funny you say about the two mercy kills that Deacon does with Wade and with
Hmm.
that woman that has her legs
Yeah.
broken. There's a moment when Deacon and Boozer find the dogs that the Rippers have been
Mm,
killing,
yeah.
and Boozer, being the more of the dog lover of the two of them, is like, "Oh shit, they found one that's injured but isn't dead." And he asked Deacon to mercy kill the dog because Boozer can't do it himself. So when
Yeah.
you said, you don't know what you would do personally, like I don't think I could mercy kill someone or an animal, because it's like, yeah, you want to, you understand the concept, but
Yeah.
being able to be the one that actually puts in the knife or actually makes someone overdose, I mean, damn,
Yeah.
heavy shit.
That's It is. And I'm glad that we touched on some of that stuff in the game, because, it's those kind of things you don't think about. If living in a world like that, there's going to have to be decisions that you make that are really tough. And the one with the dog, man, I don't know what I would do, you
Mm,
know. I love my dogs. I love animals, like, but like that pain, you they can't express it except for in noises and whimpers and stuff like that. But you have no idea what that pain that they're going through is like.
yeah.
And that there's also nothing that you can do to fix it. You don't have medicine. You're not going to be able to nurse them back to health. It's a situation where there's very few options.
Mhm.
And that's one of those moments where you see Deacon and Boozer's relationship, and they would do anything for each other, even
Yeah.
even if it meant Deacon having to do something that he wouldn't feel comfortable with, and probably was really difficult to do. He did it because he knew that it would be that much harder for Boozer to have to do it, and they're already going through a lot, and so to be able to just for a moment, you know take away something that would have caused Boozer even more grief,
Mm.
to help him, as his brother. That was yeah, another one of those powerful moments in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, I have one last question for you, and this is someone I
All
like
right.
to ask everyone. If you found yourself in the world of Days Gone, how would you fare, and what camp would you end up in?
Oh man, it's tough to think about because, like, I've got a wife and kids and pets and all that kind of stuff, and you know I would hope that we would all be there together. And Lost Lake is obviously the camp that you know has their stuff together the most and still has some heart, and heart that's in the right place. I think Copeland had heart, but he was a little bit of a whack job. And Tucker,
Mhm.
you know, you do something wrong there, she might have you for dinner. Um, and obviously,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have survived the militia. Um, but Lost Lake, I think would have been home. Um, but that's always something that we talked about, is like there's no kids in this world.
Mm.
And so what does that situation look like for somebody that has a family that's trying to survive in that world? And that's when it gets like real serious, and I'm like, oh, this is emotional. um but I would do everything in my power to protect my family
Right.
and make sure that they were safe. And that might mean not being part of a camp. It might be doing what Deacon and Boozer did, and kind of understanding that they have to tap into the camp every once in a while and have to do things for them, and but the rest of the time they're kind of living alone and on the outskirts and making sure that they're keeping each other safe. And that's very much family situation, Deacon and Boozer stuck together because they knew that they could trust each other and keep each other safe.
The family that drifts together survives
Right,
together.
right, yeah. So I'd probably have, my wife and I would have our, like matching motorcycles, and we'd have little sidecars for the kids and the
Aw.
dogs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we'd probably, find a safe spot outside of town and take turns going out and getting things that were necessary to keep each other safe. But yeah, I knock on wood. Hopefully we're never in that situation.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we never find out how we'd fare in this
Yeah.
world.
Now, if it was me by myself, I'd probably end up part of one of the camps, probably Lost Lake, and probably be working in the garage with Ricky or something on motorcycles or trying to get some trucks running or something like that. But probably keep my head down.
Yeah, nose down, they feed you.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Eric, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a pleasure. Anytime I get to talk about the game and talk about what went into it and the passion behind it and see the passion from the community and stuff, it's always a treat.
A few quick reminders. Weekdays at 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time, you can watch me live stream my Days Gone playthrough. I take on hordes, talk shit about rippers, lay waste to ambush camps, and all that before I've had my morning cup of coffee. You can find me on my YouTube channel, just search for Days Gone Podcast. And on Tuesdays, I collaborate with Spornicus Rex on his channel. We are wrapping up our Days Gone playthrough today, April 26th, but we'll be back with a different game starting next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific. If you want to support the Days Gone podcast, head over to buymeacoffee.com/daysgonepod. All donations are greatly appreciated, and they really help me with the overhead costs of running the show. A special shout out this week goes to the incredible Borislav247, who not only was my guest on the show in episodes 33 and 34, but he's also an amazingly supportive guy who bought me coffee this week. Thank you, Grandmaster Boris. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, all that good stuff, so more people can find the show. You can email me your thoughts, comments, opinions, and counter-arguments at daysgonepod@gmail.com. You can also find me moderating the Days Gone subreddit. Thanks for listening. Weaver out.